Welcome back to another episode of Research and Design Build. On this episode, we're going to be talking everything you need to know about Hummer rust, and specifically the rust between the hard tops and the aluminum bodies. So the truck I bought did have quite a bit of rust, and I did tackle that project, the repair of that myself in a two-car garage. And I've actually got the panels that I cut off. So we'll go out to my truck, walk through what you need to look for if you're buying a truck, and some of the tips that I've got there that I should have followed when I bought mine. And then we'll come back in, we'll take a look at the panels that I cut off and show you exactly how much rust my truck did have prior. And then I've also got new panels here that I had made up and bent for a buddy's truck that we're going to be repairing here in a little bit. So this is kind of the definitive guide to Hummer rust, everything you need to know, and what you need to know about going and repairing that yourself. Issue that a lot of Hummers have, especially those found in the northern part of the US and Canada, and that's body rust. So right along this side here, so the top of the Hummer is steel and this bottom part is aluminum. And then you've got this rubber gasket that runs basically from the back corner of the back passenger side door, or well, the back door of the Hummer, all the way along here. And then it wraps around the back. And this separates the steel from the aluminum. And then there's through bolts that go through. But this is something you really want to pay attention to if you're buying a Hummer. So inside the back of the Hummer, you can somewhat inspect, but when I went and bought my truck and inspected it for the first time, these big racks were not in it. However, the previous owner had installed some racks or some boxes, sort of some toolboxes that were really cheap. And so they're a Harbor Freight or a Princess Auto if you're in Canada style thin gauge box, like a 20 gauge box or 22 gauge box. Really cheap. He kind of sold it up as, hey, this is really good for off-roading and otherwise. But you could barely get the doors open to them. Something in retrospect didn't seem quite right. But it did prevent inspection of everything back here. And so if you are looking at one, I would highly recommend that you ask the person to remove any racks that they have there. These carpets are just held in place with either double-sided tape or from the factory they would have been Velcro. And so these can come off. You just fold them back, and then you can do a full inspection there. So you want to take a quick, a good thorough inspection, I'd say, not a quick inspection on both sides. So we took a look at my truck. You know what to look for and where to look for it. I will give you some indication of how bad mine was. And so I've got a couple of close-up shots here that I'll show you of what I found once I cut it out, and then also what the outside of the body did look like at the time when I bought the truck. So, when I bought the truck, the guy basically told me when I started looking at that, he goes, oh, you can just sandblast it from the outside and you'll be fine. But really once digging into it and owning the truck for a while and then cutting it off, I realized that the truth to sandblasting it from the outside really was not going to solve the issue. So there's a lot more rust on the underside here than what's actually showing on the surface. So I did try to repair it from the outside once myself. I even sandblasted inside the back of the truck a little bit to try to clean it up. But there's absolutely no way that you're going to get this sort of 1.5 inch flange clean. There's just no way. Another buddy of mine that's got an H1, he bought it, brought it over to show it to me and that sort of thing. and it had just been freshly painted black, and there was something off with it. And what the person had done was they'd actually sandblasted this edge, and that black line you see on my truck, that's that rubber gasket, they had completely sandblasted that out and then bondoed in between. And so there's almost like there's just a slight sort of wave in the body there, but there wasn't a definition between the aluminum body and the steel top. And so they had completely painted just right over it. And so his truck will be one that we cut up here. You know, we've been talking about it for a couple of years now, that we'll cut that up and get that fixed right. So as far as what it takes, the repair itself is quite straightforward. You know, you're dealing with flat panels, you're not dealing with complex curves and that sort of thing. And the steel that they used is a 14 gauge mild steel for the top. So it is commonly available. I had two of these 5-foot pieces here bent up for the sides. And so that was I want to say an 87 degree bend that was required. So it is sort of a tighter than 90 degree bend. So it was an 87 degree bend, and it took me a little bit to find a metal shop that had the right die to do that. Most guys are set up to bend 90 and that's it, or slightly less than, or slightly more than 90. You know, they'll do a 120 degree bend or something like that. To get someone with one that would do an 87 degree bend and could measure that properly, you know, took a few phone calls and that sort of thing, but there will be guys out there. And then I got one 5-foot piece cut up with a 90 degree bend. So the 90 degree bend you'll need for the back side of the truck, and the 87 degree bend is what you'll need for the two sides of the truck. So and so this is kind of what it looks like. Nothing overly complicated, but that's what you're going to need. Here I got about, it's about a 5-foot piece, and then you got your 1.5 inch bent here for your flange. So that's all you need for the filler pieces for it. And then it's just about cutting those. I just used an angle grinder and cut those to fit where I was cutting. Now, I cut just underneath where that bottom window comes. So I didn't actually go into the curvature of the window. It's just that entire bottom lip that I cut off. And for me, that's where the rust kind of had stopped, was sort of 1/2 inch underneath that. So I didn't need to go and remove any more material than that when I went and did my job. But you know, as you can see by those photos, it didn't look that bad at the time, and from the outside, it definitely didn't. Especially if I'd washed it and cleaned it up, you know, a lot of the staining from the rust would go away. But yeah, it's definitely something that's doable. I've heard people spending, you know, $12,000 US or more getting their trucks done. You know, I was able to do it in my garage at home, do all the body work, and you know, I just had a MIG welder at the time. I didn't even have a TIG, but it is fairly thick gauge steel compared to what you'd find on a regular car. And so welding that without warping is fairly easy. It is time consuming. The entire interior of the truck needs to come out. Basically back of the front, you know, the back side of the front seats. So your passenger seats in the back and headliner and everything rearward of the truck needs to come out. And then, of course, because I was already doing all of that work, I took that time to pull out some dents and some doors and painted the entire truck. So I pulled the windshields out, pulled all the trim off from around around all the doors and mirrors and that sort of thing, window trim, and you know, that took a lot longer. But once I'd had a procedure down for doing one side of the truck on the back, The second side really didn't take much time at all. So you know, it's still a couple of days of work, but you know, compared to $12,000, you know, I think that's kind of more of the Hummer tax, if you will, that comes into it rather than the actual quantity of work that's there. It's I would consider doing a quarter panel replacement on a car significantly more challenging than this, just because you've got so many compound curves and really thin metal that you're working with. Whereas with the Hummer and the truck, you got 14 gauge steel, really easy to weld. Everything's straight other than that 87-degree bend that you need. Everything else is 90 and flat to itself, and very easy to measure and compensate for. So yeah, you know, there's quite a bit of work to it, but it's not rocket science either. So if you have any questions about doing this type of work on your own Hummer, or if you got any questions about rust on a vehicle you're looking to buy, please reach out or make a comment, and I'll get right back to you. If you did find this helpful or informative in any way, please consider giving it a like, and please consider subscribing. All right, we'll catch you in the next episode.